Thank you. Thank you, Nadia. So if you're just joining this call, know that there is translation available for the audio in Ukrainian or Polish. You can go down to the bottom of the Zoom window and you should see an interpretation button from which you can select Polish or Ukrainian. Now, just to say, I'm inviting you to type in the chat, which is great. I unfortunately don't read Ukrainian or Polish. If you can type in English in the chat, that would be great. I'll have a much better chance of getting all of your comments. So I can see people joining from Ukraine, Scotland, Turkey, South Sudan, Warsaw. Great to have you with us today. So I've just asked you to write in the chat, introduce yourself with your name, your job, your organization, your location. Perhaps look out for people who are calling in from the same region as you. And yes, please do type in the chat in English. Thank you very much. That way I can understand your comments. We have people from Italy, Sri Lanka, Jordan. Great to have people from all over the world. Yes, and thank you, Victoria, for writing in both Ukrainian and English. If you'd like to do so, you'd be very welcome. So we are welcoming you all to this webinar. We'll be looking at writing effective proposals for humanitarian response. Writing effective proposals for humanitarian response. Nadia, my colleague, has just presented herself, and she's available if there are any technical issues, if you have any issues with the audio or the sound or the video, please do write to Nadia a message, a private message, and she should pick that up. So I will now introduce myself. My name is Tom Russell. I started my work in humanitarian relief work in Haiti. Some of you may be well aware of the devastating earthquake of 2010. I worked in Haiti a year after, when there was the response to the cholera outbreak. That was in 2011. Since then, I've worked in Madagascar, a country which has to its east the Indian Ocean, from where cyclones recurrently pass through the country, causing widespread flooding. And also, I spent a number of years in the Democratic Republic of Congo, most recently supporting the response to the Ebola outbreak that started in 2018. I now work for the Humanitarian Leadership Academy. I had the opportunity of traveling to Poland early this year in March, and my first trip to Poland, really fantastic to be there. So the Humanitarian Leadership Academy, we are set up to provide training and learning support to the humanitarian sector. So perhaps you've already heard of us, or perhaps this is the first chance you've had to join us, and we're running a webinar today on effective proposal writing. Great to see people typing in the chat. We'll be using the chat function a lot today. We're quite a lot of us today, which is good. We are about 72 people, I think, on the call, so we'll be making the most of the chat function. Now, Nadia, we're going to go to the Mentimeter for our first question. So I'll put that up on the screen, but then I will, Nadia, let you share the link in the chat and then share your screen with the Mentimeter. Thank you, Nadia. We're going to now go into a poll using the Mentimeter. So Nadia, I can hand you the control for that part. Thank you.
Yeah, let me just do that right now.
Thank you very much. So we're going to ask you to fill in a poll using Mentimeter. Mentimeter is a separate website. Nadia will be sharing a link with you in a moment.
Yeah, so if you can join us at menti.com and use the code 1461510, and that will take you right to this page.
So if you want to share your screen, Nadia, I'll stop my share and then you can take over.
All right, sorry. Yeah.
That's good. So Mentimeter is a separate tool, which you should see pop up on the screen. Thank you, Nadia. So you should be able to now go on to menti.com, and using the code 1461510, using the code 1461510, you should be able to respond to the poll that's on the screen. So the question is, on a scale of 1 to 4, how did you enjoy exams in school? I can see people writing in the chat. That's great too. Use Mentimeter if you can, or write in the chat. That's also great. So if you really did not like exams, you hated exams, you can put number 1. If you feel that, I got a bit anxious before doing them, that's number 2. If you say, I didn't mind them, but I prefer homework, that's number 3. And number 4, I loved exams. Oh, I absolutely loved exams. So the website we can put in here, I think you'll find it's menti.com, I believe. There you go. So what do we feel about exams? Perhaps long time ago we last did an exam, or maybe we're doing exams at this current stage of life. See that, yes, most of us feel a bit anxious before doing the exams. Some of us really don't like the exams. It's not helpful for us. It's not our preferred way of learning and being assessed. So just going to take a moment for you to respond to that question. Super. Other people are saying, yeah, got a bit anxious. I can relate to that. I think that's the code. Yes, the code. Good question, Afia. The code is 1461. Oh, thank you, Lavinia. 1461510 is the code to join this Mentimeter. So we will be using this poll a few times in today's call. So keep this open in your tab in your window. So it looks like a good few of us did not like exams. We hated exams, or we still hate exams, but most of us can resonate that, yes, we get a bit anxious before them. Thank you for showing the link. And a couple of us love exams. A couple of us find this is our ideal way of learning and demonstrating all that we know. Great. I'm going to take over the sharing of the screen now, Nadia. If you're happy to close your sharing. Thank you. And we'll keep that open in the chat. So do feel free to respond. I have another question for you. If you can type in the chat now, another question. How did you feel going into the exam room? How did you feel going into the exam room? So if you can type in the chat now, how did you feel going into the exam room? Perhaps, as you've said already, you felt nervous. Confident, yes, confident, but still nervous. So there's confidence mixed in with nerves. How did you feel going into the exam room? Stressed, yep. What's going to happen? Are they going to be good questions? Sleepy, yep. Perhaps we've been staying up late the night before, or we couldn't sleep and we're feeling fatigued. Maybe we're a bit frightened or anxious, but excited too. So it's a real mixture of emotions that we could be experiencing. Now, think back to when you've done exams. So for those of us who are familiar with the exam process, what helped you prepare for your exam? What helped you prepare for your exam? Some people upbeat, ready to roar. Great. Nervous because I wasn't ready. Yes, that is unsettling. Great. So what helped you prepare? Attending the classes, doing the reading, studying a lot. Coffee helped you prepare. That's great. Indeed. An important fuel for preparing for an exam. Studying. Yes. So, a sense of competitiveness. So perhaps you're looking around the other people sat next to you and there's a sense of, right, this is a bit of a competition. Practical exercises, case studies, praying, asking for support, but lack of sleep is also a barrier. That's great. And next question, are marks given only for correct answers? Are marks given only for correct answers? If not, why else are marks awarded? I think back to your exams, if you've been involved in exams, are marks given only for correct answers? If not, why else are marks awarded? So when you're doing your exam, you're working hard. The working out, yes, Rabina, exactly. The working out, what do we mean by that? That often when we're doing an exam, most likely in mathematics, sometimes for a fair attempt, even if the answer is correct, exactly, for demonstrating our creative thinking, for demonstrating the thinking that has gone on behind the process in responding to the question. Exactly. In math, we might not get the correct answer, but if we demonstrate our working, it might demonstrate to the assessors that we were on the right lines and we just made a mistake somewhere along the way. So you may be wondering, why are we talking about exams? I thought we were here to learn about writing a project proposal. What I'd like to put to you the idea that writing a project proposal is much like preparing for an exam. What can you tell me about a project proposal? What is the purpose of a project proposal? Type your answers in the chat. What is the purpose of the project proposal? So in this webinar, we're looking at how we can write effective proposals in the humanitarian setting. And what is the purpose of the project proposal? Yes, it's to stand out from competitors. So perhaps there are other organizations proposing to a donor a project, and we want to be the team that gets selected and we get the money to do our project. Yes, we want to convince the donor that we are the best match for the request that they are looking for. We need to be able to demonstrate what we can offer. We want to be able to show what makes us unique as an organization. And we want to grab the interest, the heart, the imagination of the donor. And we want to stand out from other organizations and be able to show the impact of our work. That's right. So there's three ways we can define a project proposal. One is a simple request for funding, where we need to persuade the donor agency who has the funding available to support us or continue supporting us in our work. A proposal becomes our contractual reference. It's an agreement that we both sign to say, yes, we will make sure we do what we said we would do in this contractual agreement. We need to be able to deliver on our promises. So therefore, we need to be very careful of what we include in our proposal so we can deliver on those promises. Exactly, a way of an agreement and communication. Thank you, Nafia. But also, as Runyararo says, it's to share ideas and how they will show impact. And it's much like the blueprint for the construction of a building. The proposal details what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, presenting what the project will look like once it's finished. So it's a way of having agreement, it's a way of communicating what we're going to do. Go back to the Menti poll. Nadia, you happy to share your screen again? I will repeat the question once we have it on the Mentimeter. So we're going to go back to Mentimeter. So it's menti.com. Thank you, Nadia, sharing the link in the chat. Nadia, if you're happy to share your screen.
Yeah, just sharing it now.
Super, thank you. So we'd like to know what experience you already have in proposal writing. What experience do you have in proposal writing? So in the survey, in the poll, you should see a new question. What experience do you have in proposal writing? From 1 on the left-hand side, that I lead the proposal writing in my team, to I'm always involved, 3, I'm sometimes asked to contribute, 4, I am seldom involved, or 5, this is something new for me. So is this something that you're always involved in? Number 2, or perhaps this is something that's new for you. Number 5. So just get a flavor of the experience we have in the room. So I think we are now nearly 90 people on the call this afternoon. And we asked you, what experience do you have in proposal writing? So it looks like that for many of us, we're sometimes asked to contribute. But for many of us, this is something that's new for us. There is a few of us who lead on proposal writing. But it looks like we've got a real mixture of experience. So hopefully we can answer the questions and any interest you have in today's session. Thank you, Nadia. You can stop sharing and I will share my screen again. So next question for us. What do you want to learn during this webinar? What do you want to learn during this webinar? If you can type in the chat. What do you want to learn during this webinar? What do you want to learn during this webinar? And we hope we'll be able to cover all of these aspects. What do you want to learn during the webinar? So we're looking at how to write effective proposals. We've been talking about how it's a little bit like doing an exam. It can make us feel nervous. It can perhaps make us feel excited. Right, so yeah, we want to learn what we need to pay attention to, the key information and content that's required, how to complete an application correctly, what the structure of the planning process is for writing a proposal. What can we do to make sure our proposal is effective? What mistakes should we avoid? How to incorporate the theory of change, TOC, in a proposal. And what are the usual reasons for rejection? Some great comments there. Thank you. So now let's talk about our donors. Who are the major donors that you work with? Who are the donor agencies that you normally work with, who fund your projects, or who you'd like to approach to gain funding for your projects? Who are the main donors that you work with? Type your answers in the chat. IMC, BHA. This is where we get all the acronyms coming through. Some of us might be asking, what do these acronyms mean? If you do know the answer, please type them in the chat. Oxfam, UNICEF, private donors, private foundations, USAID, which BHA, the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, is now a part. Yep, SIDA, BMZ. So these are some of most of these are institutional donors that you may be already familiar with. So here are 4 institutional donors that I'm familiar with working with in my experience. People in Need as well. People in Need, I believe, has a link to BHA or forms part of BHA. So that's USAID here, which is BHA. You also have ECHO, which is funded by the European Union, UK aid from the British people from the Foreign Office Development Overseas Support in the UK. So first question is, well, what is the procedure for approaching a donor like one of these institutional donors for funding? What is the procedure for approaching a donor? What is the procedure for approaching a donor? Can we turn up at the European Union and ring on their doorbell? Send a concept note? Yes, that's right, Lavinia. Often we'll start the conversation with a concept note. What is a concept note? Can someone tell me, type me in the chat, what is a concept note? Yes, read the call for proposals. Yes, Nora. Often they'll start with a call. So a call is like an advert. Perhaps all of you are very familiar with this, but here's an example of a call for proposals under a small projects fund for Ukraine that was published in February of this year by the British Embassy in Kyiv. So that's one way, is to look out for calls for proposals. Often they are published online portals, and we can respond with an expression of interest or by submitting a concept note. A concept note is a very brief outline of the objectives of the project. So it's like a mini version of our proposal. And why do we prepare a concept note? It's because we want to see, right, do we have a good match? I think someone earlier said we're looking to find out if we can provide a good match as the organization implementing the project and the donor looking to fund the project. And yes, we're looking to see what the procedure will be to write a proposal. And sometimes, yes, we can have meetings before responding to calls. Relationship building is really important. When I worked in the Democratic Republic of Congo, we got to know the donors who support the work in that part of the world, and we would meet with them to learn about what their priorities are, even before we would come to a call for proposals. That's right, donor mapping. It's good to know who is available to support your projects and who works in your area of interest. The European Union, ECHO, formerly known as the European Committee of Humanitarian Aid Office, which is where we get the acronym ECHO from, ECHO. They will publish every year a call for funding under what they describe as a worldwide decision. A worldwide decision. And they have something called the HIP, which is the Humanitarian Implementation Plan. Here we are. Humanitarian Implementation Plans. So during this webinar, I'm going to be referring quite a bit now to ECHO, partly because I have quite a lot of experience working with ECHO in Democratic Republic of Congo, but also because the format that ECHO use is a standard format that you will see time and time again used by other donors. So we're going to use their format of a proposal as an example. But I do appreciate, if you've already said in the chat, we all work with so many different organizations, so many different donors, and there will be differences in the guidelines. But for today's webinar, we'll be referring to the ECHO guidelines. So has anyone made a submission to ECHO or is planning to when the next HIP is published? The HIP is the Humanitarian Implementation Plan. The Humanitarian Implementation Plan provides more detailed information on the operational priorities identified with each country region of operation. So it details what the donor is willing to fund in that area. So use the raise your hand function in the response part of Zoom. Do you already have experience using ECHO, or would you like to be working with ECHO in the future? If you can raise your hand in the function, you should be able to click on the function to raise your hand, I hope. If not, that's fine. You can respond in the chat. Great, I see some hands being raised. Fantastic. So yes, used to. So perhaps some of us have experience of working with ECHO in the past, but we're no longer working with them. Yep. Who else has experience with ECHO? Not yet, but we'd love to. Great. Well, in that case, I hope this session will help you in that process. So it sounds like, yes, we have some experience in the past, or we would like to gain some experience working with ECHO in the future. Fantastic. Just a reminder, if you've joined the call late, in case you haven't seen it already, I will just go back and clarify to you. If you joined the call late, know that there is interpretation available in Ukrainian or Polish. You can click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen, and you can choose between Ukrainian or Polish for the audio. So just a reminder, if you're joining us a little bit later, there is translation available in Ukrainian and Polish. We were asking the question, who had experience with ECHO? And it looks like a few of us do. So if you'd like to lower your hand, in the Zoom function, we're going to ask another question. Can anyone tell me what a go, no-go meeting is? Respond by raising your hand using the team function, or if you can't use the team function, that Zoom function, then raise a hand in the message chat. Hopefully the Zoom function is working to raise a hand. So raise a hand if you can tell me what a go, no-go meeting is. What is a no-go meeting is? It sounds like we would like to cooperate and work with ECHO in the future, which is great. So I see a few hands raising. That's great. You can lower your hands now and type in the chat, what factors will influence your go, no-go decision? So a no-go meeting, go is green, no-go is red. It's something that we will do internally as a team when we hear about a call for proposal. So perhaps we learn about the new call for proposal coming from ECHO, 1st of January. We then meet as a team to decide whether we as an organization want to spend the time preparing a proposal document to respond to this call. It's often called a go, no-go meeting. It's something we do internally to discuss together, are we going to go and respond to this call. Perhaps I can clarify what we mean by a go, no-go meeting. So I'm getting it the way around. A go, no-go meeting is a meeting that we have as a team, our organization, to decide whether, yes, is the call in alignment with our experience and our field of work? So the offer that we see being published, is it something that is a good strategic fit with our organization? Is the amount that's available an amount that we can work with? Do we have enough internal staff capacity? Do we have enough time to apply? Are we going to be compliant with the donor requirements? So these are the questions that before we even start writing a proposal, we need to decide ourselves, okay, are we ready? Are we ready for this proposal? Because preparing a proposal takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, involves lots of people. So the first key meeting to have is to decide, do we want to go for this proposal? It's like when you're thinking about which exams you will sit, you can decide, am I ready to do this course? It's going to be a lot of work to get ready for this exam, and I don't want to fail the exam when I get there. So it's really important first as a team to decide, do we have the experience in the sector? Are we confident that we can do a good job if we were to be awarded the proposal? Great, we have people who are ready to get to the course. Fantastic. Now, then we can start looking at preparing a proposal. We've agreed as a team that yes, we are ready. We feel that we have the right experience. What are the key steps in the proposal writing process? What are the key steps in the proposal writing process? So imagine that as a team, you've started preparing the proposal. What process will you go through? Type your answers in the chat. What process will you go through? So somebody's asked, where can we watch the recording? So this call is being recorded, and later on this week or at the start of next week, we will be posting it on our YouTube website. So we will share information about how you can review that if you are unable to stay with the call. Great. So what are the key steps in the proposal writing process? Exactly. Start by reviewing the call. What are they asking for? Like reading the exam questions before you answer the exam. Sharing out the tasks among the team members, that's really important. Yep. That you'd imagine going through when you know you've got to prepare a document, say. What do you imagine the first things you'll be doing as you prepare to submit your proposal, that you are preparing the documents? So the first thing we would recommend is step one, a needs assessment. That's right, understand what you're doing before we start. Finding partners, seeing if there are needs assessments that have already been completed. RFP, I'm not familiar with that acronym. Diana, if you can type that in the chat, that would be great. So the first step is gather information. What are the needs? What are the needs that we're looking to respond to? And when you're working with institutional donors, often they will have documents that will help you, guide you. For example, ECHO, when the HIP, the Humanitarian Implementation Plan, they will often already describe their understanding of the needs. Exactly. If there are key evaluation criteria, make sure it's submitted. Thank you. RFP stands for Request for Proposal. That's the call that we're responding to. The next step that we'd recommend is, well, we've done a needs assessment. Now let's identify the gaps. What needs will our project address? This could include a stakeholder analysis to see who will we be working with, who we need to support, who's already working in the area. That's our second step is we've looked at the needs. Now let's look at what gaps there are, and we'll focus our response on those gaps, from which we would develop the logic of our intervention. Somebody earlier on mentioned the theory of change. The logic is that, well, if we see a need, there are people who are struggling to get access to, say, medical services. That's the gap. And our logic would be that, well, if we set up a mobile health clinic that can move around the area we're working in, then people logically would be able to access those services. So that's a really key part of the proposal, which we'll come back to later. Step 4, we then develop our plans, our budget. So these are the key parts of our proposal that we will submit. That's right, we'll throw ideas around with each other, how we'll take on all of these steps. And the last one will be to address what we call cross-cutting and quality issues. Cross-cutting and quality issues. That'll be things like making sure that we've done an analysis of gender and age. And we're going to come on to that in a moment. Now, can anybody tell me what are the key documents that we use throughout this process? What are the key documents required for each step? For our needs assessment, for identifying gaps, can you name any of the key documents that you'd expect to submit as part of a proposal? What are the key documents that you'd be working with as a team? What are the key documents? Log frame, good, yep, budget, technical and budget proposals, that's right. The proposal itself is often referred to as a narrative. That's the text. An analysis of the gaps, that's right. So an analysis of the needs. A work plan, that's right. A plan of how we're going to deliver this project. And our needs assessments, we can refer to standard needs assessment like the MIRA, the MIRA. We would also look at our risk management. So how we manage the risks in the project delivery. The communication plan, how will we communicate to each other and perhaps a wider audience. Nafia, perhaps you can elaborate more in the chat. LOE, Steve, if you'd like to clarify what you mean by that. A Gantt chart is a type of work plan, and a monitoring and evaluation plan. Great, so I've listed out here all of those documents. If you have any questions at this stage about any of these documents, please type them in the chat. Is there a document that you're not familiar with that you'd like to learn more about? Please type it in the chat. Thank you, Steve. LOE is level of effort. Level of effort. And I imagine that's related to our resources that we'll need throughout the project. And often we'll prepare a resource plan as part of our proposal that describes the personnel, the HR, the human resources that we would require, the logistics we would require, and often a procurement plan that details what we may need to procure, buy, whether that be products or services. So these are all the documents that we have in our proposal, and we know that's a lot of work to get through as a team. Which documents would you work on first? Which documents would you work on first? So add all of that, which documents would you work on first? And if you have any questions about the meaning of any of these documents, please let us know. Great, I can see people typing needs assessment, problem tree analysis. Yes, so I would always start with an assessment of the need. Perhaps there are already needs assessments reports available, and that will give us an analysis of the need. And then we can use these two tools to develop our project. So a problem tree analysis is used to look at what are the central problems, and often in a tree, the green leaf fruit part are the problems that we can see in the area where we're working, and then under the ground, the roots, those are the problems that perhaps we can't see. And developing a problem tree, doing that analysis of identifying what those problems are in the area we're working, can then help us create a solution tree, which is effectively to uproot that tree and turn it right upside down. And so the top of the tree, we now have solutions to those problems. And that is the form of our project, our logic of intervention. And often that's described, portrayed through a logical framework. So our needs assessment informs our problem tree analysis, which should be mirrored with the solution tree. And the solution tree analysis should give us our logical framework. So that's generally the order, the steps that we would go through when working with these documents. Then alongside that, risk analysis, good question, or risk assessment. Good question. Can somebody tell me, what do we mean by risk analysis? What do we mean by risk analysis? Can somebody type in the chat? What do we mean by risk analysis? What do we mean by risk analysis? What do you think? Type in the chat. There are a couple of ways to understand this. Yep, we can identify the risks that might occur during the delivery of a project and how we would manage those risks. So, for example, if there was a risk that there would be some very bad flooding in the area where we're working, and we know that this is likely to take place in the months of November and December, then we would avoid working in those months, or perhaps we would make sure that most of our work is done in October before those rains occur, before the risk becomes a reality. That's exactly one point of risk analysis which we would describe, often linked to our activity plan. There's also another example of risk analysis which you'll find in the ECHO proposal, which is actually looking at the risks that the people we're looking to serve will face. So that means that we have an assessment of needs, but then we analyze, well, what risks are there for the people that we're looking to support? So perhaps in one area where there is a need for access to food and nutrition before the harsher winter months of the year, and a risk might be that crops that people have been producing fail or do not produce as much food as they were hoping for. And that's a risk that we also need to take into account when we do our needs assessment. Super. Now, it's 40 minutes past the hour, and we're going to take a 10-minute break. 10-minute break. 10-minute break, and we're going to restart. So at 14:50 in Kyiv, at 13:50 in Warsaw, and if you're on the UK time zone, at 12:50. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. 10-minute break. So go stretch your legs, take a break from the screen, grab a cup of coffee. I know that's an important part of an exam preparation. And we will be back with you in 10 minutes. If you want to type in the chat, you can do, but we're going to take a break from speaking and we'll recommence in 10 minutes. Thank you. Great. So we're restarting. Hope you've had a chance to stretch your legs, perhaps get some coffee. Now, as you're rejoining us, can you just raise your hand, please, in the chat? Please raise your hand in the Zoom function to demonstrate that you're ready to go again. And we're going to finish. Thank you so much. We're going to finish the second half of this session. So we will keep going until past the next hour. Thank you. Welcome back. First opening question as we get back to our session. When you go shopping, now you can lower your hands, please, that you've now got back to the room. So you can lower your hands. Thank you very much. You're ready. Fantastic. When you go shopping, do you prefer to prepare a list of what you need before you go? Or do you prefer to go without a list and use your impulses? A list? List first. Depends on my mood. Yeah, perhaps we're in the mood of, we've got lots of time, but maybe we go with a list here, but not strictly following it. Have a list. If you want to be time effective, you want to use your time management effectively, a list is a must. Aha, very good. A budget as well. It's better to go with the list and to also know how much your list is going to cost. So you may be wondering, well, why are we asking about lists? First, we were talking about exams. Now we're talking about shopping and shopping lists. But the list is good to follow, but sometimes the impulses come and we buy things that perhaps weren't necessary. That can happen, can't it? And somebody's already preparing their list right now. Fantastic. Why are we talking about lists? Well, when we come to prepare a proposal, it can often be helpful to prepare a list of what we're going to include in our documents. Now, ECHO is the example we're using today. And when you look at their call for proposals, this is called the single form. The single form. They call it the single form because they say everything is in a single form. So with ECHO, they're saying everything is in a single form. And this is their shopping list. This is their requirements. Now, there's a lot of items on that list, and with the time that we have available, we don't have time to do everything. So we're going to just shorten that list for time management purposes. And these are what we have decided are the key components of a proposal. The key components of a proposal. Now, we're going to go back to the Mentimeter. So Nadia, if you're happy to take back over the control. And Nadia is going to put that survey, that poll, back on our screens. And the next question that you will see is, which sections would you like to learn more about? Which sections would you like to learn more about? So Nadia.
Just posting the link again in the chat so that
Thanks.
everyone can access that. And okay, I will share my screen now.
Thank you. Super. So you can go back to the poll in menti.com. And the code is the same. The code you can use is 1461510, 1461510. Perhaps you're already connected. The question on the screen: which sections would you like to learn more about in the time that we have left? So you should see there needs assessment, risk analysis, beneficiaries, gender and age marker, logic of intervention, resilience marker, monitoring and evaluation, implementation, and field coordination. And we're asking you to list no more than 2 sections so that we know which of the sections you're most interested in, and that will help judge how we spend the rest of our time. We've got about half an hour or so together. So you can see a lot of people clicking on logic of intervention. I will make a note of this. And resilience marker. Logic of intervention. Resilience marker. And I can see in the chat as well. Needs assessment and risk analysis is also coming out as key. resilience also. Great. So it looks like needs assessments, risk analysis, logic of intervention, resilience marker are the top 3 that we're getting from this poll. Great. So we'll make sure we cover those sections in the rest of this call. Thank you, Nadia. I believe we can move on to the next question now. Thank you very much. I will share my screen and we'll go back to our slide deck. So a question for you now is, what are the common donor headaches when reviewing proposal submissions? Now, put yourselves in the place of the donor agency. You've sent out your call. The organizations have met and decided they're going to respond. They've gone through all of the documents. They've sent it to you. But the responses, for some reason, aren't what you were hoping for or expecting or required. So we're going to look at what are some of the common donor headaches when reviewing proposal submission. And we're going to look at that section by section. So we're going to start with needs assessment and risk analysis. What are the common headaches do you think donors have when they look at needs assessments and risk analysis? What are the problems, or imagine you're marking an exam. Which questions might people not get right or miss out some of their working? Yep, there might be a lack of clear logic. So in their analysis, they may receive some information about the needs, but then perhaps they make some assumptions about how that results in the roots of the problem. It might be that the donor has many proposals to review. That's right. What about the needs assessment in particular? What makes a good needs assessment? Right, so perhaps the budget does not relate to the needs assessment. So that can happen, that we can do a needs assessment, and sometimes we can start writing our project and our own ideas come to our mind, and we must forget what we had in our needs assessment. And that is why the problem tree and the logic tree, the solution tree, is really important. So I'll just come back to that briefly. So we looked at this just now. Needs assessments are really important, but what can happen is we can do our needs assessment and our analysis. Sometimes we can go straight to our logical framework or straight to our narrative and miss out the problem tree analysis, solution tree analysis. Thank you. Situation analysis is also really important. Exactly. Sometimes the needs assessment does not directly communicate to the problem. So we need to make sure that there is that link in our thinking. This is the working. When we're doing our exam, the examiner is not just giving us marks for a correct answer, but they're looking at our working. So that's where a problem tree analysis, a solution tree analysis can help us ensure that the needs assessment, we take into account all the needs and that our response is responding to those needs. It's also important to refer to the NHO HRP. Ahmed, can you tell us what an NHO and HRP is in the chat, please? So what other headaches might we get when we're working on a proposal? So here's some examples from ECHO. So a good needs assessment and risk analysis is vital for the success of the action. DG ECHO is a needs-based donor, and funding allocations are based on the evaluation of needs. And this chapter of the document will help DG ECHO to understand whether the needs assessment has been done in a timely manner and whether the information and data are reliable. So for donor, a goods needs assessment and risk analysis is vital. So it's a core part of the proposal. And as somebody else has mentioned, DG ECHO will also check whether the proposed action is coherent with DG ECHO's own evaluation of needs. So this means that an organization like DG ECHO will have done their own needs analysis, and they'll want to see, well, how accurate or how much does our analysis match and mirror their own analysis, and whether the proposed intervention addresses the actual problems of the beneficiary. So this is the big headache The big headache is whether or not we've done our comprehensive needs assessment and whether our project, our logic of intervention, is responding to those needs. And that's right. Sometimes there's a rush. We rush through this process. We rush through the process and we want to get as quick as we can to our logical framework, because we know the logical framework is probably one of the first things the donor will read. This is true. But the logical framework needs to be based on a solid foundation of a needs assessment. Super. Let's go back to our shopping list with Echo, and let's have a look at, somebody mentioned logic of intervention, I think was a high one. So we're going to look at that. What headaches might the donor have when looking at our logic of intervention? Our logic of intervention, I'll give it a description here. This is the description. Here it says this is the most important part of the single form. The information provided will be used to assess the quality of the logic of intervention. In particular, the links between the previously identified needs, the principal and specific objectives, the results to be achieved, the activities, the preconditions, the risks, and the assumptions. Now, for some of us, those words may be very familiar. They are often used in creating what's called a logical framework, which is a table that we see these terms as columns and rows. Often a 4x4 table that perhaps you're already very familiar with. And this is our logic of intervention, described, illustrated in a logical framework. So what headaches might donors have when they come to look at our logical framework, the structure that describes how our activities will help overcome problems that the community that we are looking to support will face? What headaches might a donor have when they're going through this part of a proposal? So the logic of intervention builds on the identified needs and describes the objectives, the principal, specific objectives of what we're going to do and how what we're going to do is going to overcome these problems, meet these needs, and support the people that we're looking to support. That's right. So perhaps there's an error in our logic. Perhaps it's not clear how the activities lead to the intended results. Or perhaps we miss out something really important. Perhaps there is a precondition. Perhaps, for example, we're working in a nutrition project and we're relying on the nutritional food for the young babies to be provided by another organization. And that organization, for some reason, unable to provide that. So all of a sudden, we can't deliver the activity. So that's where we also start thinking about risks. We talked about risks earlier. There are two types of risks. One is the risks that the people we're looking to serve are exposed to. And the other are the risks that we might experience in delivering our project. And that's right. Sometimes we'll get a proposal which contains every activity that the partner can possibly deliver, but without necessarily addressing the actual needs. That's a really good point. Now, another really important part within the logic of intervention is what we call the justification. So based on our needs assessment and analysis, you should prepare a compelling justification for your activity design addressing the following. So I'm not going to read out all of those points, but the donor, this actually is an example now from BHA, from the USAID Department Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, and these are the questions that they will be asking you as you prepare your proposal. So let me pull out one of these bullet points. For example, they'll ask, well, why provide this intervention now? So it's not just about understanding the needs, but knowing, okay, why now? Why this intervention now? Great. That's the logic of intervention. If you have any questions, please do type them in the chat. I appreciate we're going fairly quickly. This is an introduction to effective proposal writing, and I wanted to give us a chance to look at the other elements that we find important and that you listed as important. What is BHA? Good question. BHA is the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance. The Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, and let me just pick out their emergency guidelines. Here we go. Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, which is the department under USAID. The name has taken over what was formerly known as USAID. And we were also asking about field coordination. So what problems, what headaches will donors see in a proposal under the field coordination section? Or what are the challenges that you might encounter in field coordination that you would need to address and write about in your project proposal? What are the headaches that a donor might have when it comes to field coordination? So, what are the headaches when it comes to field coordination? What are the headaches that a donor might have when reviewing proposal submissions when we are looking at field coordination? And we will be sharing with you the materials of this course. Yes, of course we will. And most of what you're seeing is actually available online through the portal of DG ECHO. What other problems might have you had? Yep, lack of clear role and responsibility description. So perhaps there are many organizations working in an area and it's not clear who has what role, what responsibility. Perhaps the assumptions we make within our projects, perhaps the assumptions of the logic of intervention or the assumptions about the activities of other organizations, is that we don't know if another organization is going to do what they said they would do. An assumption is anything that we are relying on, that we require in order to do our work. So if we are relying on an agreement with the Ministry of Health to support health facilities, and that agreement is not signed, then we can't do our project. So again, BHA is one of the institutional donors like ECHO, and that's part of USAID funding from the American government. So coordination is key to ensure efficiency, coverage, and effectiveness of the action. It's also a way to help avoid double targeting. Double targeting means that the same person receives the same type of aid where other people go without. So it's making sure that we meet the needs of the beneficiaries, and that is also an element of the proposal writing process. Now, can anyone tell me, for beneficiaries, what issues or what headaches might a donor have? What questions? When it comes to support beneficiaries, it's a section of the proposal document. What questions might a donor have on beneficiaries, people who are looking to support? I think Annie's already mentioned double targeting, avoiding double targeting. On your screen, you can see some text, which I believe is from Ukraine, that we are inclusive. Yes, very important. We need to think about the beneficiaries, who they are. We need to know information about the different gender, age. We need to know how the project will support them and benefit them. That's right, because a project will support people in different ways. In some ways, they may be directly benefiting from our work. If we're supporting a health clinic, somebody who's receiving healthcare is directly benefiting from that service, but perhaps someone else in the family is then indirectly benefiting because the person, their family member, has been restored to health, and as a family, they can experience a better quality of life. Are they informed? Do they agree about the needs of the intended project? Are they included in the development proposal? That's really key point. Thank you, Nora. And when you come to look at the guidelines for ECHO, those are the two big questions they're asking. First of all is identification criteria. How are we selecting the people that we will help? Our resources will likely be restrained. We can't support everybody, and we have to decide what criteria we will use in knowing who we will support to avoid people being served perhaps more than we can, and to make sure that we meet those who are perhaps most in need at that time. It has to be very timely. And also, as Nora mentioned, involvement of beneficiaries in the design of the action. So are we including beneficiaries, the people we're looking to support and work for, in the development of our plans? So when we prepare a proposal for ECHO, the partner must explain how and why, and by what means, the beneficiaries and affected populations have been and will be involved in the design, implementation, and monitoring of the action. So it's really important that we can describe how we will include beneficiaries in the design, the delivery, and the monitoring of our work. Often this is something that's overlooked or not really given enough attention. And this also links to what we call accountability to affected populations. Accountability to affected populations. This is an example from BHA in their guidelines. And two really key documents that you will expect to be referring to when you're preparing a humanitarian response in a proposal is the Sphere Handbook and the Core Humanitarian Standard. Can you raise your hand, please? Raise your hand using the Zoom function if you're familiar with both of these tools or one of these tools, the Sphere Handbook or the Core Humanitarian Standard. Great, I can see hands starting to come up. So often, the donor will require us to make sure that we are referring to the Sphere Handbook or referring to the Core Humanitarian Standard. Now, this is something that's new for you. Do recommend type these into Google, the Sphere Handbook, the Core Humanitarian Standard. I believe there are now versions available in many languages and hopefully the language that you are using. But these are standards, these are humanitarian standards. And if you'd like to learn more about them, you can also go on to Kaya, which is a platform that's run out of HLA, to study and learn more about these two initiatives. So this is all about supporting our work to make sure that our work is accountable to those who we are serving. Are they the same thing or different? So the Sphere Handbook is a project which was set up maybe 20 years ago. The latest edition is 2018. And it's a description of the minimum standards that we would look to provide during a humanitarian response. So on the left-hand side, the Sphere Handbook often describes the technical standards that we would look to provide. So, for example, the quantity of water that we would make available to people for drinking on a daily basis, if that's part of our response. And on the right-hand side, the Core Humanitarian Standard, that describes often the way in which we work. The way in which we work. So here, number 2, humanitarian response is effective and timely. So that's describing something that we don't quantify in numbers, but we describe the way in which we will provide that support. So if you'd like to learn more, there's more we can learn about through Kaya, and we'll come to that at the end. So that's our element of the beneficiaries. People were also asking about gender and age marker. Gender and age marker. Can anybody tell me what questions the donor will have in the gender and age marker, or what the gender and age marker is? What do the donors want to know about gender and age in your project proposal? Some of you have already mentioned the importance of demonstrating and describing the characteristics of the beneficiaries to know whether you have boys, girls, men, women. But what might they want to know with regards to gender and age? That's right. Thank you, Lavinia. The question is our project sensitive to the specific needs of women and girls? That's right. The specific needs of women, girls, men, boys, elderly women, elderly men. The people that our project is looking to support, have we taken into account the specific needs of each of the people group that we're looking to support? So when we did our needs assessment at the very start, did we look at it through the lens of, okay, well, how do needs differ between women and girls? Or how do needs differ between girls and boys? age marker. That's right. So the gender and age marker combines the two, both gender and age. So this is what it looks like when you open it up in the ECHO proposal guidelines documents. And I think I may have an example available. Let me have a quick look. Here we go. The description. Exactly. So it's the gender age marker is a toolkit that gives us a reference to, I'm just going to read out some of the text on the screen, but not all of it. How do we differentiate the needs and capacities of women, girls, boys, and men of all ages? Of all ages. So it helps us to appreciate the differences. So if we have a problem where people are not getting access to education, well, how does that differ between girls and boys? Are girls or are boys least likely to get access to education, and how do their needs differ? So often, a donor will ask, did you complete a gender age marker analysis? ECHO have a toolkit. Often donors will have a description of questions they would want you to ask, but what's important is that it will tell you how to track gender and age sensitive actions, and also allows DG ECHO to monitor its own performance on integrating gender and age. So often these donors will be reporting on these aspects, and this is why they ask us these questions. Great. Now, I think I had noted down resilience marker as well as something you were interested in. So let me just pull that up here. Can anybody tell me, yes, what about disability? Should it be included? Good question. I believe within gender and age, I'm trying to think now off the top of my head if it is included in the gender and age marker. I will come back to you when I can confirm that information. Does the gender age marker include non-binary gender actions? Again, I will need to check with the current version available in ECHO. The other topic that you expressed interest in was the resilience marker. The resilience marker. Now, can anybody tell me what questions would a donor have with regards to the resilience marker? What questions would a donor have with regards to resilience? And what do we mean by resilience? What do we mean by resilience? What do we mean by resilience? So we've talked about gender and age. We've talked about ensuring that beneficiaries are included in the project design, decisions made about how we will support them. We've talked about ensuring the quality of our work using humanitarian standards such as the Sphere Handbook, core humanitarian standard, which you just saw a moment ago. Thank you. The adaptability to sudden changes in a situation. So now, are we talking about the project, the resilience of the project, or the resilience of the people that we're looking to support? Yes, the sustainability of our actions. So often in a proposal, the resilience marker or the resilience section is referring to the people that we are supporting. So the ability of an individual, a household or a community, or a country or region to resist and quickly recover from a crisis. This is the text that you will find in the proposal guideline documents from ECHO. So here, the donor wants to know, well, yes, there's been a crisis. How quickly, how easily do we think this community, the people that we're looking to support, can recover from this crisis? So that we know as a supporting agency what we need to do that will support that recovery process. So, for example, if we're working in Haiti and there's been the earthquake and we want to rebuild homes, what's going to help best? Is it that actually people in that community have the skills to build homes, but they're missing materials, they need financial support, cash to buy the materials they need? So the question of resilience is thinking about what's going to help the people to recover from the crisis that is adapted to their needs, to their context, to the skills they already have and the competencies they already have. And that's right. It's something, resilience, and for all of these aspects. So this is what the resilience marker looks like. The resilience marker, the age and gender marker is something that we want to see throughout our projects. Great. We're now going to starting to come to a close. And I'd just like you to ask yourself a question. This is something you can type in the chat if you'd like, or you can write it down for yourself. You've seen just some examples of what the donor is expecting to see in your project proposal. Some of the key questions a donor will have. Now, green or red light? How ready are you now? So imagine the exam is tomorrow, and tomorrow morning you're going to be preparing a project proposal. Say it's for ECHO or UNICEF or SIDA. How are you already meeting the donor requirements? So from what you've heard so far, how do you think you're already meeting the donor requirements? You already have the answers to the questions. Or what do you need to do? What do you need to be doing to meet the donor requirements? What do you need to be doing to make sure that your next proposal meets these donor requirements, that the donor won't respond with, no, we're not supporting you? We're coming to a close, 10 more minutes to go. 2 questions on the screen. Green, how are you already meeting the donor requirements? Red, what do you need to be doing to meet the donor requirements? So last 10 minutes. Have a think, and you can share in the chat or make a note for yourself. But we hope this session has helped you just become perhaps just sparking some ideas of, okay, we're 50% ready. That's great. Keep updated documentation, information, research available at all times. Fantastic. So the next time when it comes around to the exam time, you've already got all your documents ready. That's great. Get ready, indeed. And a great way to do it, and I think we saw some of you suggest that at the very start, is go through the donor requirements. So I'll show you. No rush. Great. This is the single form. So this is what the donor is requiring. So all the text you've seen on the screen has come from this document, and it's listing, like our shopping list, it's our requirements. The donor is like an exam paper. The donor will describe to us everything that it's asking. And we need to make sure that we answer those questions. Yeah, make sure we include the gender and resilience marker, have our logic of intervention which is clear, keep a track of the context, any emerging issues, how the context may change. Right, we might want to provide examples of similar projects that have been successful that will support our bid. Yes, there are some additional annexes which a donor like ECHO will require or suggest. Here they are, bottom left hand. Doesn't list previous projects, but I imagine that could be included. Great. So how ready do you feel now? How ready do you feel? Anything that you think, oh, I really need to spend some more time studying, so I'm ready for the exam. What else do you want to study? Whilst you're thinking, Nadia has prepared an evaluation form for you to complete for this session. Nadia, if you could just post that in the chat, and we have that available in English, Polish, and Ukrainian.
Yeah, so I'm posting that now. I'm posting 3 links. And yeah, if you could just give your feedback, we will just use this information for our own reference to make sure that we always improve on the work that we do. It should only take about 2 minutes to complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. That's super. So you'll see in the chat the link to the evaluation form for this session. There are language versions in English, Polish, and Ukrainian. So we'd like you to take a moment, either right now or after the call, to click on the link. If you can click on the link before the call finishes, and we will indeed share the materials with you afterwards, and this recording will become available. So just to wrap up, just to share some more of my experiences of preparing for exams. So I prepared many proposals in my time. Might seem simple bit of advice: make sure you answer the question. Sometimes perhaps we're excited or we're nervous, we've come into that exam room, we've come into that meeting room to prepare the proposal, and we start writing before we've really read the requirements, before we've really read the answer to the question. So you need to be very thorough, checking that you've met all the donor requirements. And if you're not able to, indicate that you can't. I think it's good to be honest and explain any reasons, because the donor will ask you if you don't mention something on the age and gender marker or the resilience marker. They will want to know why. They will ask that question. Also, I think some people have already mentioned it, highlight what makes your organization well placed to respond to the needs. Perhaps it's your experience working with the affected population. Perhaps it's the skill sets of the members of your team that make you unique and really well placed, because the donor wants to join and collaborate with you if you are the best people to support. And be aware that during the proposal writing process, you can expect to be working with multiple versions of documents that you will submit, and each document will undergo several revisions with inputs and reviews from a large number of people. So you can imagine that there'll be some versions that will be reworked, perhaps thrown away or got rid of. So you'll need to find a way of working that allows all those individuals involved to access the most up-to-date documents, ensuring that documents aren't being worked on that are out-of-date versions, or that there are parallel versions being worked on at the same time. So good document management is really important. And ensure that all the information you present across the documents align and match each other. So earlier on, we looked at how many documents are included in a project proposal submission, and make sure that the logical framework matches the meal framework, matches the budget narrative. It can seem like quite a lot of work when you're preparing these documents, and if any changes are made to one document, they need to be made in several others. And also, this is a Gantt chart. Someone mentioned this at the start. The project proposal is also for us. It's not just for the donor, because it gives us a clear plan of how we're going to deliver our project. So it might seem a lot of effort and time at the start to go into lots of detail, but actually that can serve us. And if we can start the project with a clear plan because we worked on it during the proposal, we save ourselves some time and we get off to a good start in delivery. So if you'd like to learn more specifically about ECHO, you can go onto their website. There's learning and training. There's a whole host of online courses that you can join. We also have at Kaya. Kaya is our platform of the Humanitarian Leadership Academy. There is an introduction to proposal and report writing. So if this course was helpful for you, this webinar today, do go and look at the formal self-study course, which is available in Polish and in Ukrainian. Coming to the end of our session together, please complete the evaluation form if you've not done so. Nadia, if you can just repost the links in case people haven't seen it come through, that'd be great. And if you have any questions as we draw our session to the close, please do pop them in the chat. And this recording will be available if you want to go back over anything we looked at. Thank you, Nadia. Please complete the evaluation form. It's really helpful for us to get to know what was effective for you, and also to know what more you'd like to ask about. Super, all questions answered. Fantastic. If you have any questions and you'd like to post them in the chat, please do. Nadia, we'll just keep it open a little bit longer, but we can stop the recording, Nadia, and then if people do have any questions, I'm happy to respond to those. Thank you.